Emma
These flower
Calloway had a
crowns turned
theory
out
about
beautifully,
pigeons.
don't you think?
She
They really
believed
did. I
they
love the
gathered in
colors you
parks not
chose.
because of the
Thank you.
breadcrumbs,
Look at the
but because
pigeons,
they
sweetie.
enjoyed watching people
So
fall apart in
pretty. Yes,
public.
isn't it so beautiful?
3 of
I
them
love
were
it
staring at
here.
her right now from the
I've
fountain
been
ledge
thinking
as she
about our
arranged
conversation.
her flower
And what did
crowns
you
on the
conclude?
old green
That
blanket
we
she
should move
used as a
forward.
display cloth. She did not blame them. She probably would have watched herself too. It was a Tuesday morning in early October, and the air in Central Park had that sharp, clean bite that New York wore like a warning. Emma tucked her dark hair behind her ear and adjusted the price tag on a crown woven from dried lavender and white ribbon. $5 each. She had made 12 of them the night before, sitting on the floor of her studio apartment, with the television on for company. She had lost her waitressing job at the Harbor Grill 2 weeks ago, when the restaurant closed without warning. The owner had left a note taped to the locked door. Emma had read it 3 times in the rain. She was not the kind of woman who cried easily. She was the kind who made flower crowns and sat up on the park path by the old oak trees and smiled at strangers, until one of them handed over a $5 bill. It was a living, barely, but it was hers. The park was busy that morning. Joggers passed in steady streams. A woman in a yellow coat walked a tiny dog that seemed to believe it was much larger than it was. Emma watched all of them with the easy attention of someone who had spent years reading tables. Understanding what people needed before they asked. That was when she noticed the boy. He was sitting on the bench across the path. Maybe 7 years old, wearing a navy blue coat that looked expensive and new sneakers that were probably worth more than Emma's rent. He sat very still, with his hands folded in his lap and his eyes fixed on the ground in front of him. There was no phone in his hands, no backpack of toys, no adult nearby. He just sat there in the middle of all that movement, looking like a small island no one had thought to visit. Emma watched him for a moment. Something about his stillness was different from ordinary childhood boredom. It was heavier than that. She picked up one of her flower crowns, a small one made with yellow and orange blossoms, and walked over. She sat down on the far end of the bench without asking, leaving plenty of space between them, and looked out at the fountain the way someone does when they are pretending not to be paying attention. After a moment, she said, without looking at him, "You know what I just realized? That pigeon over there has been staring at me for 20 minutes. I think he wants my lunch. The problem is, I do not have lunch, so we are both disappointed." Nothing happened for a beat. Then, from the corner of her eye, she saw the tiniest corner of his mouth twitch. She kept going, still facing the fountain. "I think his name is Gerald. He has very judgmental eyes. Gerald has opinions about everything. He looked at my flower crown earlier like he wanted to leave a 1-star review." The boy made a small sound. It was not quite a laugh, but it was the beginning of one, the shape of it. Like a door opened just a crack. Emma turned to look at him then. "Do you want one? I make them myself. This one has marigolds. Marigolds are basically the loudest flower in existence. Very confident. Very yellow." She held out the crown. "You could wear it and Gerald would have to take you seriously." The boy looked at the crown. Then he looked at her. His eyes were large and dark brown, the kind that had clearly been doing a lot of careful watching lately. He reached out slowly and took the crown from her hand. He did not put it on his head. Instead, he turned it over in his hands like he was studying how it was made, tracing the stems she had bent and woven together. "I'm Emma," she said. He looked up. "Benny," he said. His voice was soft, a little rusty, like it had not been used much recently. "Nice to meet you, Benny. Is Gerald bothering you too, or is he only after me?" Benny looked at the pigeon. The pigeon tilted its head. Benny let out a real laugh this time, brief and surprised, as if it escaped before he could stop it. He clapped a hand over his mouth immediately. Like laughing was something that required permission. Emma pretended not to notice how significant that was. She just smiled at the fountain. What neither of them knew was that across the path, half hidden behind a parked coffee cart, a tall man in a charcoal suit had stopped walking. He had come to the park to take a phone call away from the office, something Patrick had practically begged him to do because Theodore Blackwell had not left his building in 4 days, and even his assistant was starting to look worried. Theodore was not watching the park. He was watching his son. He had not seen Benny laugh in 8 months, not since Catherine left. Taking her suitcases and her warmth and leaving behind a house that had all the right furniture and none of the right feeling. Theodore had tried everything he knew how to try, which, if he was honest, was not very much. He was very good at acquiring things and very poor at being present. He knew this about himself the way you know about a crack in the wall you keep painting over. But the woman on the bench had made Benny laugh in under 4 minutes. Using only a story about a pigeon named Gerald. Theodore did not move. He stood very still, his phone forgotten in his hand, watching the two of them sitting in the October light, and felt something shift in his chest, like furniture being moved in a room that had been locked for a very long time. He told himself he was just relieved. He told himself he was simply observing. He told himself a great many things in those few minutes, the way a careful man does when something catches him completely off guard. Across the path, Emma was showing Benny how to tell which flowers would last longest in a crown by the thickness of their stems. Benny was listening with the focused intensity of a child who has decided something matters. He placed the marigold crown carefully on his head and looked at Gerald the pigeon with great mysteriousness. Gerald flew away. Benny laughed again, and this time he did not cover his mouth. Theodore spent the drive back to the office telling himself that the logical next step was to hire a better nanny. The agency had sent 3 candidates in the past month, and Benny had sat across from all of them in polite and absolute silence. The problem was not the candidates, Patrick had said gently. The problem was that Benny had decided to stop letting people in, and a credential from a childcare college was not the key to that particular door. Thor sat at the window of his 42nd floor office and looked at the city and thought about the woman on the park bench who had not used credentials at all. She had used a pigeon named Gerald. By Thursday, he had found out her name. Patrick was excellent at discreet inquiries. Emma Calloway, 28 years old, former waitress at the Harbor Grill, now selling handmade flower crowns in Central Park. No current employer. No stable income based on what the park revenue could reasonably generate. Theodore told himself he was reviewing facts, not making a decision. He was still telling himself this when he walked into the park on Friday morning with his hands in his coat pockets. Emma was already set up by the oak trees, adjusting a crown with blue forget-me-nots on the corner of her blanket. She looked up when she heard footsteps stop in front of her display. Theodore Blackwell was not a man who was easy to ignore. He was tall, with the kind of controlled stillness that comes from years of boardrooms, and he wore his suit like a second skin. But what Emma noticed first was that he looked tired in a way that sleep probably could not fix. $5 each, she said. Gerald is not here today to vouch for the quality, but I can give you a personal guarantee. Theodore blinked. Then he understood. You remember me? You were standing next to the coffee cart for 11 minutes watching your son? I notice things. Occupational habit. She held up a crown with deep burgundy flowers. This one is very professional. Boardroom appropriate. Theodore sat down on the edge of the bench near her blanket, which was not something he had planned to do. He laughed, he said. He has not laughed in 8 months. Emma set the crown down. Her tone shifted slightly, still easy but with something careful behind it. He is a good kid. Very observant. He was watching the stems while I explained them, and I could see he was actually thinking about what I said. He does that. He watches everything. Theodore paused. I am not good at this. At what? Conversation that does not have a clear objective. Emma looked at him for a moment. Okay, what is your objective right now? Theodore found that the honest answer was easier than the prepared one. I want to ask if you would consider spending time with my son, paid time, as a nanny or a companion or whatever the appropriate word is. He needs someone who can reach him, and I have run out of approaches. Emma was quiet for a beat. She looked at the flower crowns on her blanket, then back at him. I am a waitress who got laid off and now sells flowers in a park. I have no childcare training. He made him laugh in 4 minutes. I also talk to pigeons. He liked that. She tilted her head. What would this actually look like? Theodore gave her the details in the straightforward way he gave presentations. Fair salary room, if she wanted it, since her apartment commute from Brooklyn was significant.
These flower
Meals,
crowns turned
flexible
out
hours.
beautifully, don't you think?
His assistant
They
would
really
handle
did.
the
I love the
paperwork.
colors you chose.
He would
Thank
stay
you.
out of the
Look at the
way.
pigeon, sweetie.
Emma
So
studied him with the
pretty. Yes,
focused
isn't it
attention
so
that had made her an
beautiful?
excellent waitress. The
I've been
ability
thinking
to
about our
read what a person
conversation.
was actually asking
And
under
what
the
did you
surface
conclude?
of what they were saying.
That we should move forward.
What she saw in Theodore Blackwell was not arrogance. It was a man who had hit the exact edge of what money and efficiency could fix, and was standing there genuinely lost. I will try it, she said. But I want to be clear about something. I am not going to perform for your household or pretend to be a different version of myself because the furniture is expensive. I am going to be exactly this person with the pigeon jokes and the flower explanations and whatever else works for Benny. If that is acceptable, I am in. Theodore met her eyes. That is exactly what I want. Emma stood up and began folding her blanket. Then let me just tell Gerald goodbye. He is probably here somewhere judging us. Theodore looked around the park instinctively and then caught himself doing it, which was the first genuinely unguarded moment he had experienced in longer than he could clearly remember. The Blackwell house was not what Emma had imagined, or rather it was exactly what she had imagined, and the reality of it was still staggering. A townhouse on the Upper East Side, 4 stories, a garden in the back, ceilings that made the rooms feel like they were breathing. Gloria, the housekeeper, appeared immediately in the entrance, hall with the posture of a woman. Defending a perimeter, she looked at Emma's canvas. Bag and second-hand coat with the precise expression of someone doing a calculation and not liking the result. Miss Calloway, she said, we have prepared a room on the 3rd floor. Thank you, Emma said. I love 3rd floors. Excellent pigeon visibility. Gloria did not smile. Theodore, standing just behind Emma, made a sound that was not quite a cough. Benny was at the top of the stairs. He saw Emma and his face did the thing where it almost showed what it was feeling before catching itself. Emma waved. He gave a tiny wave back. Gerald sends his regards, she said. Benny's face broke open into a grin, quick and bright, and he ducked back around the corner as if embarrassed by his own happiness. Emma looked at Theodore. Theodore was watching the empty space where his son had just been standing with an expression that had nothing careful about it. All Emma understood then that this arrangement was going to be complicated in ways that had nothing to do with flower crowns. She understood it and walked up the stairs anyway, because Benny Blackwell had a laugh that deserved to be heard, and some things were worth the complication. The first 2 weeks at the Blackwell house settled into a rhythm that surprised Emma more than anyone. She had expected stiffness, rules, the heavy formality of a household built around a man who wore his suit like armor. What she found instead was something quieter and stranger, a house full of beautiful things and very little warmth, like a museum after closing time. Benny was her whole focus every morning. They ate breakfast together at the long kitchen table while Gloria moved around them with the energy of a woman tolerating a mild inconvenience. Emma taught Benny how to make faces using only his eyebrows, a skill she had perfected during slow shifts at the restaurant when the cook told bad jokes and she could not laugh out loud. Benny practiced in the reflection of the toaster with complete seriousness. They walked in the park every afternoon. Emma brought her materials and showed Benny how to weave the stems together. He turned out to have steady, patient hands and a genuine eye for which colors worked beside each other. He made a crown with white daisies and a single red flower in the center, and held it up to study it with the expression of a small architect reviewing blueprints. That one is the boss flower, Emma told him. All the others work for it. Benny put the crown on Emma's head with great ceremony. 2 women walking past smiled at them. Emma bowed. Benny giggled into his coat sleeve. Theodore watched none of this directly and all of it sideways. He left early and came home late, which Emma had expected. What she had not expected was the way he sometimes appeared at the edge of things. In the kitchen doorway when she and Benny were still at the table, in the garden entrance, when they were working on crowns in the afternoon light, he never interrupted. He just stood there for a moment, with the expression of someone listening to music from another room, and then he moved on. Gloria watched Emma the way a lighthouse watches a shoreline. Steady and suspicious, and convinced something was going to go wrong, it went wrong on a Wednesday. Emma came downstairs in the morning to find Benny sitting at the table staring at a letter. He had opened it himself, which he probably should not have done, but he was 7 and it had his name on it. Emma sat beside him and read it over his shoulder. It was from Catherine, Benny's mother. She was in London, and she was getting married, and she wanted Benny to know he was loved very much. She had written it in the careful, slightly formal way of someone who had practiced the words many times. It was a kind letter. It was also a letter that arrived without warning and told a 7-year-old boy that his mother had built a whole new life that had a different shape than the one he was in. Benny sat very still. Emma did not say anything for a long moment. She sat with him in the quiet kitchen while the letter rested on the table between them like a stone neither of them had put there. Then she said, "Do you want to talk about it, or do you want to do something with your hands?" Benny thought about this seriously. "Hands," he said. They spent the next hour making the most elaborate flower crown Emma had ever constructed. Benny chose every flower from the bunch she had in her bag, directing the color placement with focused energy, and Emma wove it together exactly as he instructed. By the end, it was enormous and spectacular and slightly unhinged, which was exactly right. Benny put it on the kitchen table in the center, like a centerpiece. "It is the best one," he said. "Absolutely the best one," Emma agreed. He was quiet for another moment. Then he said, "She is not coming back, is she?" It was not quite a question. Emma looked at him steadily. "I think she loves you, and she is also living somewhere else. Both of those things can be true at the same time." Benny nodded slowly, working through it. "Do you think my dad is sad about it?" Emma thought of Theodore standing in doorways at the edges of rooms. "I think your dad is sad about a few things and has not figured out how to say so yet." Benny looked at the flower crown on the table. "You are good at saying things. I had a lot of practice talking to people who were hungry and tired and just wanted their food. You learned to be direct." Benny almost smiled. "I want to show Dad the crown. Then we will show him tonight." Theodore came home at 7, which was earlier than usual. Emma was reading in the sitting room when she heard the front door and then heard Benny's footsteps running down the hall, which was not a sound the house had made in a long time. She heard Benny's voice, excited and tumbling over itself, and then Theodore's voice lower, asking a question. She did not move from her chair. A few minutes later, Theodore appeared in the sitting room doorway. He was still in his coat, holding the enormous flower crown in both hands, with the expression of a man who had been handed something he did not have a category for. He said, "You two made this today," Theodore said, directed. "I executed." Theodore looked at the crown. "He talked to me just now about Catherine's letter. He told me what you said, that both things can be true at the same time." Paused. "That was the right thing to say. It was just the true thing." Theodore set the crown carefully on the side table and sat down in the armchair across from her. Still in his coat, which meant he had not planned to stay in this room and had ended up here anyway. "I owe him more than I have been giving," he said. Emma looked at him without softening it. "Yes." He did not flinch. "I do not know how to stop working. It is what I do when everything else is difficult." "I know that pattern," Emma said. "My mother cleaned the house when she was anxious. Every surface in our apartment was spotless during hard times. It took me years to understand that cleaning was her way of controlling something when everything else felt out of control." Theodore looked at her. "What did you do?" "Talked to strangers. Made things with my hands. Showed up in places I was not entirely sure I belonged, and figured it out from there." She gestured lightly around the room. Case in point. Something shifted in his expression. A careful man catching himself being less careful than usual. "You belong here," he said. "Benny needs you here." Emma looked at him steadily. "Benny needs his father present more than he needs me." "I know," said it simply, without argument, which was not what she had expected. "I am trying to change that. I canceled 2 meetings this week." "I know." He mentioned it. He said you had dinner with him on Tuesday, and you let him pick the restaurant, and he picked the diner on the corner because they have the large paper menus he can draw on. He described the entire meal to me in significant detail. He drew a very accurate pigeon on the back of his menu. Theodore stared at her. Then he laughed. A real laugh startled out of him. And for a moment, the careful architecture of his face came completely apart, and he looked like a different person. Younger and less managed and much more interesting, Emma felt something shift in her chest that she filed away, under things to examine later. Theodore looked at the flower crown on the side table. Then he looked at Emma. "Can I ask you something that is not related to Benny?" "You can ask, are you happy here?" Emma considered this honestly. "I am not unhappy," she said, "which is more than I could say 2 months ago. And I think something is being built here that is worth paying attention to." "Something," he said. "The house is warmer than it was," Emma said carefully. "Benny laughs more. You come home earlier?" "Gloria almost smiled at me yesterday. I think it was an accident, and she was embarrassed about it, but it happened." Theodore looked at her for a long moment with the attentive stillness she had first noticed across the park path.
These flower crowns
"Thank you,"
turned out
he said
beautifully, don't you
finally.
think?
They
"For all
really
of
did.
it."
I love the
Thank
colors you
Gerald.
chose.
Thank
Emma
you.
said.
Look at the
He
pigeon,
started
sweetie.
the whole thing.
So pretty.
Theodore
yes,
shook his
isn't
head
it so
slowly,
beautiful?
still
I
almost
love
smiling.
it here.
He picked up the
I've
flower
been thinking
crown
about
from
our
the side table,
conversation.
turned it once in
And
his
what did you
hands,
conclude?
and set
we
it
should
back
move
down
forward?
gently like something that mattered. Outside the window, the city moved and hummed in its constant way. And inside the house, something quieter and newer was doing the same thing, growing steadily in the spaces between words, between doorways and park benches and paper menus covered in drawings of pigeons, between a man learning to come home and a woman who had arrived not knowing she was looking for one.